Hercule Poirot, the detective," said Mrs. Allerton. She and her son were sitting in brightly painted scarlet basket chairs outside the Cataract Hotel in Aswan. They were watching the retreating figures of two people, a short man dressed in a white silk suit and a tall, slim girl. Tim Allerton sat up in an unusually alert fashion. "That funny little man?" he asked incredulously. "That funny little man? What on earth's he doing here?" "Oh, darling, you sound quite excited. Why do men enjoy crime so much? I hate detective stories. I never read them. But I don't think Monsieur Poirot is here with any ulterior motive. He's made a good deal of money, and he's seeing life, I fancy. Seems to have an eye for the best-looking girl in the place." Mrs. Allerton tilted her head a little on one side as she considered the retreating backs of Monsieur Poirot and his companion. The girl by his side overtopped him by some 3 inches. She walked well, neither stiffly nor slouchingly. "I suppose she is quite good-looking?" Mrs. Allerton shot a little glance sideways at Tim. Somewhat to her amusement, the fish rose at once. "She's more than quite. Pity she looks so bad-tempered and sulky. Perhaps that's just expression, dear." "Unpleasant young devil, I think. But she's pretty enough." The subject of these remarks was walking slowly by Poirot's side. Rosalie Otterbourne was twirling an unopened parasol, and her expression certainly bore out what Tim had just said. She looked both sulky and bad-tempered. Her eyebrows were drawn together in a frown, and the scarlet line of her mouth was drawn downward. They turned to the left out of the hotel gate and entered the cool shade of the public gardens. Hercule Poirot was prattling gently, his expression that of beatific good humour. He wore a white silk suit carefully pressed and a Panama hat, and carried a highly ornamental fly-whisk with a sham amber handle. "It enchants me, the black rocks of Elephantine, and the sun, and the little boats on the river. Yes, it is good to be alive." "You do not find it so, mademoiselle?" Rosalie Otterbourne said shortly. "It's all right, I suppose. I think Aswan's a gloomy sort of place. The hotel's half empty, and everyone's about 100. She stopped, biting her lip. Hercule Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Oh, it is true, yes. I have one leg in the grave. I wasn't thinking of you. I'm sorry if that sounded rude." "Not at all. It is natural you should wish for companions of your own age. Ah, well, there is one young man at least. The one who sits with his mother all the time. I like her, but I think he looks dreadful. So conceited." "And am I conceited?" "Oh, I don't think so." She was obviously uninterested, but the fact did not seem to annoy Poirot. He merely remarked with placid satisfaction, "My best friend says that I am very conceited." "Oh, well, I suppose you have something to be conceited about. Unfortunately, crime doesn't interest me in the least." "I am delighted to learn that you have no guilty secret to hide." Just for a moment the sulky mask of her face was transformed as she shot him a swift, questioning glance. Poirot did not seem to notice as he went on. "Madame, your mother was not at lunch today. She is not indisposed, I trust?" "This place doesn't suit her. I shall be glad when we leave." "We are fellow passengers, are we not? We both make the excursion up to Wadi and the second cataract." "Yes." They came out from the shade of the gardens onto a dusty stretch of road bordered by the river. 5 watchful bead sellers, 2 vendors of postcards, 3 sellers of plastic scarabs, a couple of donkey boys, and some detached but hopeful infantile riffraff closed in upon them. "You want beads, sir? Very good, sir. Very cheap.
Look, you want to buy postcards,
very lucky.
Donkeys,
Hercule Poirot made vague gestures to rid himself of this human cluster of flies. Rosalie stalked through them like a sleepwalker. "It's best to pretend to be deaf and blind." The infantile riffraff ran alongside, murmuring plaintively. Their gaily coloured rags trailed picturesquely, and the flies lay in clusters on their eyelids. They were most persistent. The others fell back and launched a fresh attack on the next corner. Now Poirot and Rosalie only ran the gauntlet of the shops. They turned into the 5th shop, and Rosalie handed over several rolls of film, the object of the walk. Then they came out again and walked towards the river's edge. One of the Nile steamers was just mooring. Poirot and Rosalie looked interestedly at the passengers. "Quite a lot, aren't there?" She turned her head as Tim Allerton came up and joined them. He was a little bit out of breath, as though he'd been walking fast. They stood there for a moment or two. "An awful crowd as usual, I suppose," he remarked disparagingly, indicating the disembarking passengers. "They're usually quite terrible," agreed Rosalie. All three wore the air of superiority assumed by people who are already in a place when studying new arrivals. "Hello!" exclaimed Tim, his voice suddenly excited. "I'm damned if that isn't Lynette Ridgway!" If the information left Poirot unmoved, it stirred Rosalie's interest. She leaned forward, and her sulkiness quite dropped from her as she asked, "Where? That one in white?" "Yes, with the tall man. They're coming ashore now. He's the new husband, I suppose. Can't remember his name now." "Doyle. Simon Doyle. It was in all the newspapers. She's simply rolling, isn't she?" "Only about the richest girl in England." The three lookers-on were silent, watching the passengers come ashore. Poirot gazed with interest at the subject of the remarks of his companions. "She is beautiful." "Some people have got everything." There was a queer, grudging expression on her face as she watched the other girl come up the gangplank. Lynette Doyle was looking as perfectly turned out as if she were stepping onto the centre of the stage at a review. She had something, too, of the assurance of a famous actress. She was used to being looked at, to being admired, to being the centre of stage wherever she went. She was aware of the keen glances bent upon her, and at the same time almost unaware of them. Such tributes were part of her life. She came ashore, playing a role, even though she played it unconsciously, the rich, beautiful society bride on her honeymoon. She turned with a little smile and a light remark to the tall man by her side. He answered, and the sound of his voice seemed to interest Poirot. His eyes lit up, and he drew his brows together. The couple passed close to him. He heard Simon Doyle say, "We'll try and make time for it, darling. We can easily stay a week or two here, if you like it." His face was turned towards her, eager, adoring, a little humble. Poirot's eyes ran over him thoughtfully, the square shoulders, the bronzed face, the dark blue eyes, the rather childlike simplicity of the smile. "Lucky devil," said Tim after they'd passed. "Fancy finding an heiress who hasn't got adenoids and flat feet." "They look frightfully happy," said Rosalie, with a note of envy in her voice. She added suddenly, but so low that Tim did not catch the words, "It isn't fair." Poirot heard, however. He had been frowning somewhat perplexedly, but now he flashed a quick glance towards her. "I must collect some stuff for my mother now." Tim raised his hat and moved off. Poirot and Rosalie retraced their steps slowly in the direction of the hotel, waving aside fresh proffers of donkeys. "So it is not fair, mademoiselle." "I don't know what you mean." "I am repeating what you said just now under your breath." "Oh, yes, you did." "Oh, well, it really seems a little too much for one person. Money, good looks, marvellous figure, and—" She paused. Poirot said, "And love, eh? And love. But you do not know. She may have been married for her money." Didn't you see the way he looked at her? "Oh, yes, mademoiselle. I saw all there was to see. Indeed, I saw something that you did not." "What was that?" "I saw, mademoiselle, dark lines below a woman's eyes. I saw a hand that clutched a sunshade so tight that the knuckles were white." "What do you mean?" "I mean that all is not the gold that glitters. I mean that though this lady is rich and beautiful and beloved, there is all the same something that is not right. And I know something else." "Yes?" "I know," said Poirot, frowning, "that somewhere, at some time, I have heard that voice before, the voice of Monsieur Doyle, and I wish I could remember where." But Rosalie was not listening. She'd stopped dead. With the point of her sunshade she was tracing patterns in the loose sand. And suddenly she broke out fiercely. "I'm odious, I'm quite odious! I'm just a beast through and through, because I'd like to tear the clothes off her back and stamp on her lovely, arrogant, self-confident face. I'm just a jealous cat. But that's what I feel like. She's so horribly successful and poised and assured." Hercule Poirot looked a little astonished by the outburst. He took her by the arm and gave her a friendly little shake. "Ah, you will feel better for having said that." "I just hate her. I've never hated anyone so much at first sight." "Oh, magnificent!" Rosalie looked at him doubtfully. Then her mouth twitched and she laughed. "Oh, bien." Poirot laughed too. They proceeded amicably back to the hotel. "I must find mother," said Rosalie as they came into the cool, dim hall. Poirot passed out the other side onto the terrace overlooking the Nile. Here were little tables set for tea, but it was still early. He stood for a few moments looking at the river, then strolled down through the garden. Some people were playing tennis in the hot sun. He paused to watch them for a while, then went on down the steep path. It was here, sitting on a bench overlooking the Nile, that he came upon the girl of Chez ma tante. He recognized her at once. Her face, as he had seen it that night, was securely etched upon his memory. The expression on it now was very different. She was paler, thinner, and there were lines that told of a great weariness and misery of spirit. She drew back a little. She had not seen him, and he watched her for a while without her suspecting his presence. Her small foot tapped impatiently on the ground. Her eyes, dark with a kind of smouldering fire, had a queer kind of suffering, dark triumph in them. She was looking out across the Nile where the white-sailed boats glided up and down the river. A face and a voice. He remembered them both. This girl's face and the voice he had heard just now, the voice of a newly made bridegroom. And even as he stood there considering the unconscious girl, the next scene in the drama was played. Voices sounded above. The girl on the seat started to her feet. Lynette Doyle and her husband came down the path. Lynette's voice was happy and confident. The look of strain and tenseness of muscle had quite disappeared. Lynette was happy. The girl who was standing there took a step or two forward. The other two stopped dead. "Hello, Lynette," said Jacqueline de Belfort. "So here you are. We never seem to stop running into each other. Hello, Simon. How are you?" Lynette Doyle had shrunk back against the rock with a little cry. Simon Doyle's good-looking face was suddenly convulsed with rage. He moved forward as though he would have liked to strike the slim, girlish figure. With a quick bird-like turn of her head, she signalled her realization of the stranger's presence, and Simon turned his head and noticed Poirot. "Hello, Jacqueline. Didn't expect to see you here." The words were unconvincing in the extreme. The girl flashed white teeth at them. "Quite a surprise?" Then, with a little nod, she walked up the path. Poirot moved delicately in the opposite direction. As he went, he heard Lynette Doyle say, "Simon, for God's sake, what can we do?" Dinner was over. The terrace outside the Cataract Hotel was softly lit. Most of the guests staying at the hotel were sitting at little tables. Simon and Lynette Doyle came out. A tall, distinguished-looking grey-haired man with a keen, clean-shaven American face beside them. As the little group hesitated in the doorway, Tim Allerton rose from his chair nearby and came forward. "You don't remember me, I'm sure," he said pleasantly to Lynette. "But I'm Joanna Southwood's cousin." "Oh, of course, how stupid of me. You're Tim Allerton. This is my husband." A faint tremor in the voice? Pride? Shyness? "And this is my American trustee, Mr. Pennington." "Pleased to meet you. You must meet my mother." A few minutes later they were sitting together in a party, Lynette in the corner, Tim and Pennington each side of her, both talking to her, vying for her attention. Mrs. Allerton talked to Simon Doyle. The swing doors revolved. A sudden tension came into the beautiful upright figure sitting in the corner between the two men. Then it relaxed as a small man came out and walked across the terrace. Mrs. Allerton said, "You're not the only celebrity here, my dear. That funny little man is Hercule Poirot." She had spoken lightly, just out of instinctive social tact to bridge an awkward pause, but Lynette seemed struck by the information. "Hercule Poirot? Oh, of course. Of course, I've heard of him." She seemed to sink into a fit of abstraction. The two men on either side of her were momentarily at a loss. Poirot had strolled across to the edge of the terrace, but his attention was immediately solicited. "Sit down, Monsieur Poirot. What a lovely night!" "Mais oui, madame, it is indeed beautiful." He smiled politely at Mrs. Otterbourne. What draperies of black ninon and that ridiculous turban effect! Mrs. Otterbourne went on in a complaining voice. "Quite a lot of notables here now, aren't there? I expect we shall see a paragraph about it in the papers soon. Society beauties, famous novelists." She paused, with a slight mock-modest laugh. Poirot felt, rather than saw, the sulky, frowning girl opposite him flinch, and set her mouth in a sulkier line than before. "You have a novel on the way at the moment, madame?" Mrs. Otterbourne gave a little self-conscious laugh again. "Oh, I'm being dreadfully lazy. I really must set to. My public's getting terribly impatient, and my publisher, poor man, appeals by every post, even cables." Again he felt the girl shift in the darkness. "I don't mind telling you, Monsieur Poirot, I am partly here for local colour. Snow on the desert's face. That's the title of my new book. Powerful, suggestive. Snow on the desert, melted in the first flaming breath of passion." Rosalie got up, muttering something, and moved away down into the dark garden. "One must be strong," went on Mrs. Otterbourne, wagging the turban emphatically. "Strong meat, that is what my books are. All important. Libraries banned. No matter. I speak the truth. Sex! Ah, Monsieur Poirot, why is everyone so afraid of sex? The pivot of the universe. You have read my books." "Alas, madame, you comprehend I do not read many novels. My work," Mrs. Otterbourne said firmly. "I must give you a copy of Under the Fig Tree. I think you will find it significant. It is outspoken, but it is real." "It is most kind of you, madame. I will read it with pleasure." Mrs. Otterbourne was silent a minute or two. She fidgeted with a long chain of beads. It was wound twice round her neck. She looked swiftly from side to side. "Perhaps I'll just slip up and get it for you now." "Oh, madame, pray do not trouble yourself. Later—" No, it's no trouble. I'd like to show you." "What is it, mother?" Rosalie was suddenly at her side. "Nothing, dear. I was just going to get a book for Monsieur Poirot." "The fig tree? I'll get it." "You don't know where it is, dear. I'll go." "Yes, I do." The girl went swiftly across the terrace and into the hotel. "Oh, let me congratulate you, madame, on a very lovely daughter," said Poirot with a bow. "Rosalie? Oh, yes, she is good-looking. But she's very hard, Monsieur Poirot. No sympathy with illness. She always thinks she knows best. Oh, she imagines she knows more about my health than I do myself." Poirot signalled to a passing waiter. "A liqueur, madame? A chateau? A condiment?" Mrs. Otterbourne shook her head vigorously. Oh, no! I am practically a teetotaler. You may have noticed I never drink anything but water, or perhaps lemonade. I cannot bear the taste of spirits." "Then may I order you a lemon squash, madame?" He gave the order, 1 lemon squash and 1 Benedictine. The swing door revolved. Rosalie passed through and came towards them, a book in her hand. "Here you are." Her voice was quite expressionless, almost remarkably so. "Monsieur Poirot has just ordered me a lemon squash." "And you, mademoiselle, what would you take?" "Nothing. Thank you." Poirot took the volume which Mrs. Otterbourne held out to him. It still bore its original jacket, a gaily coloured affair representing a lady with smartly shingled hair and scarlet fingernails, sitting on a tiger skin, in the traditional costume of Eve. Above her was a tree with the leaves of an oak, bearing large and improbably coloured apples. It was entitled Under the Fig Tree, by Salome Otterbourne. On the inside was the publisher's blurb. It spoke enthusiastically of the superb courage and realism of this study of a modern woman's love life. Fearless, unconventional, realistic were the adjectives used. Poirot bowed and murmured, "I am honoured, madame." As he raised his head, His eyes met those of the authoress's daughter. Almost involuntarily he made a little movement. He was astonished and grieved at the eloquent pain they revealed. It was at that moment that the drinks arrived and created a welcome diversion. Poirot lifted his glass gallantly. "À votre santé, madame, mademoiselle." Mrs. Otterbourne, sipping her lemonade, murmured, "So refreshing! Delicious!" Silence fell on the three of them. They looked down to the shining black rocks in the Nile. There was something fantastic about them in the moonlight. They were like vast prehistoric monsters lying half out of the water. A little breeze came up suddenly and as suddenly died away. There was a feeling in the air of hush, of expectancy. Hercule Poirot brought his gaze back to the terrace and its occupants. Was he wrong, or was there the same hush of expectancy there? It was like a moment on the stage when one is waiting for the entrance of the leading lady. And just at that moment the swing doors began to revolve once more. This time it seemed as though they did so with a special air of importance. Everyone had stopped talking and was looking towards them. A dark, slender girl in a wine-coloured evening frock came through. She paused for a minute, then walked deliberately across the terrace and sat down at an empty table. There was nothing flaunting, nothing out of the way about her demeanour, and yet it had somehow the studied effect of a stage entrance. "Well," Mrs. Otterbourne tossed her turbaned head. "She seems to think that she's somebody, that girl." Poirot did not answer. He was watching. The girl had sat down in a place where she could look deliberately across at Lynette Doyle. Presently Poirot noticed Lynette Doyle leant forward and said something, and a moment later got up and changed her seat. She was now sitting facing in the opposite direction. Poirot nodded thoughtfully to himself. It was about 5 minutes later that the other girl changed her seat to the opposite side of the terrace. She sat smoking and smiling quietly, a picture of contented ease. But always, as though unconsciously, her meditative gaze was on Simon Doyle's wife. After a quarter of an hour, Lynette Doyle got up abruptly and went into the hotel. Her husband followed her almost immediately. Jacqueline de Belfort smiled and twisted her chair round. She lit a cigarette and stared out over the Nile. She went on smiling to herself. "Monsieur Poirot?" Poirot got hastily to his feet. He'd remained sitting out on the terrace alone when everyone else had left. Lost in meditation, he'd been staring at the smooth, shiny black rocks when the sound of his name recalled him to himself. It was a well-bred, assured voice, a charming voice, although perhaps a trifle arrogant. Hercule Poirot, rising quickly, looked into the commanding eyes of Lynette Doyle. She wore a wrap of rich purple velvet over her white satin gown, and looked more lovely and more regal than Poirot had imagined possible. "You are Monsieur Hercule Poirot?" It was hardly a question. "At your service, madame?" "You know who I am, perhaps?" "Yes, madame, I have heard your name. I know exactly who you are." Lynette nodded. That was only what she'd expected. She went on in her charming autocratic manner. "Will you come with me into the card-room, Monsieur Poirot? I'm very anxious to speak to you." "Certainly, madame." She led the way into the hotel. He followed. She led him into the deserted card-room and motioned him to close the door. Then she sank down on a chair at one of the tables, and he sat down opposite her. She plunged straight away into what she wanted to say. There were no hesitations. Her speech came flowingly. "I have heard a good deal about you, Monsieur Poirot, and I know that you are a very clever man. It happens that I am urgently in need of someone to help me, and I think very possibly that you are the man who would do it." Poirot inclined his head. "You are very amiable, madame. But you see, I am on holiday, and when I am on holiday, I do not take cases. That could be arranged." It was not offensively said, only with a quiet confidence of a young woman who has always been able to arrange matters to her satisfaction. "I am the subject, Monsieur Poirot, of an intolerable persecution. That persecution has got to stop. My own idea was to go to the police about it, but my husband seems to think that the police would be powerless to do anything. Perhaps if you would explain a little further—" "Oh, yes, I will do so. The matter is perfectly simple." There was no hesitation, no faltering. Lynette Doyle had a clear-cut, business-like mind. She only paused a minute so as to present the facts as concisely as possible. Before I met my husband, he was engaged to a Miss de Belfort. She was also a friend of mine. My husband broke off his engagement to her. They were not suited in any way, and she, I am sorry to say, took it rather hard. I am very sorry about that, but these things cannot be helped. She made certain, threats, to which I paid very little attention, and which I may say she has not attempted to carry out. But instead she has adopted the extraordinary course of following us about wherever we go. Poirot raised his eyebrows. Rather unusual revenge. Very unusual, and very ridiculous, but also annoying. She bit her lip. Poirot nodded. Yes, I can imagine that. You are, I understand, on your honeymoon. Yes. It happened the first time at Venice. She was there at Daniel's. I thought it was just coincidence, rather embarrassing, but that was all. Then we found her on board the boat at Brindisi. We understood that she was going to Palestine. We left her, as we thought, on the boat. But when we got to Mina, she was there, waiting for us. And now we came up the Nile by boat. I was half expecting to find her on board. When she wasn't there, I thought she'd stopped being so childish. But then when we got here, she was here, waiting. Poirot eyed her keenly for a moment. She was still perfectly composed, but the knuckles of the hand that were gripping the table were white with the force of her grip. And you are afraid this state of things may continue? Yes. Of course the whole thing is idiotic. Jacqueline is making herself utterly ridiculous. I am surprised she hasn't got more pride, more dignity. Poirot made a slight gesture. There are times, madame, when pride and dignity, they go by the board. There are other, stronger emotions. Yes, possibly. But what on earth can she hope to gain by this? It is not always a question of gain, madame. Something in his tone struck Lynette disagreeably. She flushed, and said quickly, "You're right. A discussion of motives is beside the point. The crux of the matter is, this has got to be stopped." "And how do you propose that it should be accomplished, madame?" "Well, naturally my husband and I cannot continue being subjected to this annoyance. There must be some kind of legal redress against such a thing." She spoke impatiently. Poirot looked at her thoughtfully as he asked, "Has she threatened you in actual words in public, used insulting language, attempted any bodily harm?" "No." "Then, frankly, madame, I do not see what you can do. If it is a young lady's pleasure to travel to certain places, and those places are the same where you and your husband find themselves, what of it? The air is free to all. There is no question of her forcing herself upon your privacy. It is always in public that these encounters take place." "You mean there's nothing that I can do about it?" "Nothing at all, as far as I can see. Mademoiselle de Belfort is within her rights." But it's maddening. It's intolerable that I should have to put up with this." "I must sympathize with you, madame, especially as I imagine that you have not often had to put up with things." "Look, there must be some way of stopping it." "You can always leave, move on somewhere else." "Then she will follow." "Very possibly, yes." "It's absurd." "Precisely." "Anyway, why should we run away? As though—" "Exactly, madame, as though. It is all there, is it not?" Lynette lifted her head and stared at him. "What do you mean?" Poirot altered his tone. He leant forward. His voice was confidential, appealing. He said very gently, "Why do you mind so much, madame?" "Why? But it's maddening, irritating to the last degree. I've told you why." "No, not altogether." "What do you mean?" Poirot leant back, folded his arms, and spoke in a detached, impersonal manner. "Écoutez, madame, I will recount to you a little history. It is that one day, a month or two ago, that I am dining in a restaurant in London. At the table next to me are two people, a man and a girl. They are very happy, so it seems, very much in love. They talk with confidence of the future. It is not that I listen to what is not meant for me. They are quite oblivious of who hears them and who does not. The man's back is to me, but I can watch the girl's face. It is very intense. She is in love, heart, soul, and body, and she is not of those who love lightly and often. With her it is clearly the life and the death. They are engaged to be married, these two. That is what I gather. And they talk of where they shall pass the days of their honeymoon. They plan to go to Egypt. Well? That is a month or two ago. But the girl's face, I do not forget it. I know that I shall remember it if I see it again. And I remember too the man's voice. And I think you can guess, madame, when it is I see the one and hear the other again. It is here, in Egypt. The man is on his honeymoon, yes, but he is on his honeymoon with another woman. Oh, what of it? I had already mentioned the facts. The facts, yes. Well, then? A girl in the restaurant mentioned a friend who she was very positive would not let her down. That friend, I think, was you, madame. Yes, I told you we had been friends. Lynette flushed. And she trusted you. Yes. She hesitated for a moment, biting her lip impatiently. Then, as Poirot did not seem disposed to speak, she broke out. Of course the whole thing was very unfortunate. But these things happen, Monsieur Poirot. Ah, yes, they happen, madame. You are of the Church of England, I presume. Yes. Lynette looked slightly bewildered. Then you have heard portions of the Bible read aloud in church. You have heard of King David and of the rich man who had many flocks and herds, and the poor man who had one ewe lamb, and of how the rich man took the poor man's one ewe lamb. That was something that happened, madame. Lynette sat up. Her eyes flashed angrily. I see perfectly well what you are driving at, Monsieur Poirot. You think, to put it vulgarly, that I stole my friend's young man. Looking at the matter sentimentally, which is, I suppose, the way people of your generation cannot help looking at things, that is possibly true. But the real hard truth is different. I don't deny that Jackie was passionately in love with Simon, but I don't think you take into account that he may not have been equally devoted to her. He was very fond of her, but I think that even before he met me he was beginning to feel that he'd made a mistake. Look at it clearly, Monsieur Poirot. Simon discovers that it is I he loves, not Jackie. What is he to do? Be heroically noble and marry a woman he does not care for, and thereby probably ruin 3 lives? For it is doubtful whether he could make Jackie happy under those circumstances. If he were actually married to her when he met me, I agree that it might be his duty to stick to her. Though I'm not really sure of that. If one person is unhappy, the other suffers too. But an engagement is not really binding. If a mistake has been made, then surely it is better to face the fact before it is too late. I admit that it was very hard on Jackie, and I am very sorry about it. But there it is. It was inevitable. I wonder. She stared at him. What do you mean? It is very sensible, very logical, all that you say. But it does not explain one thing. What is that? Your own attitude, madame. See you, this pursuit of you. You might take it in 2 ways. It might cause you annoyance, yes, or it might stir your pity, that your friend should have been so deeply hurt as to throw all regard for the conventions aside. But that is not the way you react, no. To you this persecution is intolerable. And why? It can be for one reason only, that you feel a sense of guilt. Lynette sprang to her feet. How dare you? Really, Monsieur Poirot, this is going too far. But I do dare, madame. I am going to speak to you quite frankly. I suggest to you that although you may have endeavoured to gloss over the fact yourself, you did deliberately set about taking your husband from your friend. I suggest that you felt strongly attracted to him at once, but I suggest that there was a moment when you hesitated, when you realized that there was a choice, that you could refrain or go on. I suggest that the initiative rested with you, not with Monsieur Doyle. You are beautiful, madame, you are rich, you are clever, intelligent, you have charm. You could have exercised that charm, or you could have restrained it. You had everything, madame, that life can offer. Your friend's life was bound up in one person. You knew that. But though you hesitated, you did not hold your hand. You stretched it out, and like the rich man in the Bible, you took the poor man's one ewe lamb. There was a silence. Lynette controlled herself with an effort, and said in a cold voice, "All this is quite beside the point." "No, it is not beside the point. I am explaining to you just why the unexpected appearances of Mademoiselle de Belfort have upset you so much. It is because though she may be unwomanly and undignified in what she is doing, you have the inner conviction that she has right on her side." "That's not true." You refuse to be honest with yourself." "Not at all." "I should say, madame, that you have had a happy life, that you have been generous and kindly in your attitude towards others." "I have tried to be." "And that is why the feeling that you have deliberately caused injury to someone upsets you so much, and why you are so reluctant to admit the fact. Pardon me if I have been impertinent, but the psychology, it is the most important fact in a case. Even supposing what you say were true, and I don't admit it, what can be done about it now? One cannot alter the past. One must deal with things as they are." Poirot nodded. "You have the clear brain, yes. One cannot go back over the past. One must accept things as they are. And sometimes, madame, that is all one can do. Accept the consequences of one's past deeds." "You mean that I can do nothing? Nothing?" "You must have courage, madame. That is what it seems like to me." "Couldn't you talk to Jackie, to Mr. Belfort? Reason with her?" "Yes, I could do that. I will do that, if you would like me to do so. But do not expect much result. I fancy that Mademoiselle de Belfort is so much in the grip of a fixed idea that nothing will turn her from it." "But surely we can do something to extricate ourselves?" "You could, of course, return to England and establish yourselves in your own house." "Even then, I suppose Jacqueline is capable of planting herself in the village so that I should see her every time I went out of the grounds?" "True. Besides, I don't think Simon would agree to run away." "What is his attitude in this?" "He's furious, simply furious." Poirot nodded thoughtfully. Lynette said appealingly, "You will talk to her?" "Yes, I will do that. But it is my opinion that I shall not be able to accomplish anything." Lynette said violently, "Jackie is extraordinary. One can't tell what she will do. You spoke just now of certain threats she made. Would you tell me what those threats were?" "She threatened to kill us both. Jackie can be rather Latin sometimes." "I see." Poirot's tone was grave. Lynette turned to him appealingly. "You will act for me?" "No, madame. I will not accept a commission from you. But I will do what I can in the interests of humanity. That, yes. There is a situation that is full of difficulty and danger. I will do what I can to clear it up, but I am not very sanguine as to my chance of success." "But you will not act for me?" "No, madame," said Hercule Poirot.